Hey guys, tonight we're going back to 1931. It's a bitter winter in Chicago, one of those bone-deep colds where the city itself seems to creak when the wind howls. Ice coats the sidewalks, men shuffle in worn shoes, and women hold scarves to their faces as they line up outside a squat brick building. They're waiting for soup. Just soup. A slice of bread if they're lucky. And at the front of the line, a man in a long wool coat, a scarf neat around his neck, smiling behind thin leather gloves as he gestures people forward. His name is Alphonse Capone. But here, in this moment, nobody calls him that. He's just the guy helping us eat. You probably won't survive this version of Chicago. Not because of gunfire or gangsters, though there's plenty of that, but because if the cold doesn't break you, the desperation might. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it in your part of the world? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's late January 1931, and the streets of Chicago crunch with dirty snow. Steam hisses from manholes. The city is trying to carry on. Shops open late, close early, and nobody has anything to spend. Unemployment is suffocating the working class. Bread lines stretch down blocks. Families pawn shoes to buy potatoes. But there's one place that always has something warm to offer. Capone's Soup Kitchen. Located at 935 South State Street, it's not fancy. Just a storefront painted with a hand-lettered sign that reads, "Free soup, coffee and donuts for the unemployed." The words are direct. No pretense. And yet, if you squint, they shimmer with something oddly generous. Like a mirage in the middle of the economic desert that was the Great Depression. People line up for hours, mostly men, but not only. There are war veterans who never found peace, young boys with soot on their hands, mothers holding babies that barely blink, and when they reach the front of the line, a plate is placed in their hands. Soup, a slice of bread, maybe a coffee, and if it's a good day, one of those heavy, almost stale donuts that sit in your stomach like a prayer, and standing just inside offering a smile, sometimes a handshake, Al Capone. Yes, that Capone, the man most newspapers call public enemy number one. The man whose name causes mayors to flinch and judges to hire extra security. And here he is, dishing out soup as if he's a social worker, with a Tommy gun hidden under his apron. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Capone doesn't do anything without a reason. Even this kind act in the freezing wind, is wrapped in strategy. It's easy to forget that by 1931, he's not just a gangster. He's a celebrity. People know his name the way we know movie stars or billionaires today. His smile, his cigar, even his fedora are cultural fixtures. And there's power in that. Real power. So why the soup kitchen? Well, many people still think that Capone did it out of guilt, or maybe as a way to earn public favor before his trial. Others say it was a smokescreen, a way to distract from the heat coming down on him from the federal government. He knew they were watching. Everyone knew. His rivals, his lawyers, even the paperboys shouting, "IRS closes in on Scarface." But here's the thing most folks miss. Capone didn't just want to rule Chicago with guns. He wanted to be liked. He liked being liked. Every bowl of soup served was a photo op, a newspaper column, a conversation in the barber shop. You know, maybe he ain't so bad after all. My cousin ate there twice this week, and it worked. People who'd never touched bootleg whiskey or placed a bet in their lives suddenly found themselves defending him. "He's feeding families," they'd say. What's the government doing? Handing out subpoenas? Ironically, that's exactly what the government was doing, because behind those brick walls and smoky back rooms, men in gray suits were digging. Not into his gunfights, not his bootlegging, but his taxes. Yes, taxes. The very thing no gangster ever considered glamorous. But we'll get to that. Right now, back on State Street, the line is moving slowly. A man shuffles forward, limping from a war wound he doesn't talk about. A child sneezes into a sleeve. The door swings open, and the smell hits them. Thick broth, maybe with barley or onions if the donations were generous that week. It doesn't matter. It's warm. It's food. And in the depths of the depression, that's a kind of gold. Capone walks among them sometimes, greeting people by name. He remembers names. That's something few people expect. But it's part of his charm. He asks about a man's mother, tells another guy to stay strong. And in those moments, he becomes less a criminal, more a patron saint of survival. He even tells one of the volunteers to make sure the old guy in the gray coat gets extra bread today. Why? Who knows? Maybe he liked his mustache. These tiny acts humanize him, even as federal agents collect hotel receipts and bank slips just a few miles away. By the time the line fades and night falls, Capone disappears too. Slips into a waiting car. The kitchen is cleaned, the pot scrubbed, the door locked behind the last volunteer. But the memory lingers. Tomorrow, the line will be back. Longer, maybe. Hungrier. And Capone will be ready. Because feeding people is one thing, but feeding stories? That's where he's always been a master. Alphonse Gabriel Capone isn't born with a cigar in his mouth or a $1,000 suit on his back. That comes later. He starts as a short-tempered, wide-eyed Brooklyn kid with too many brothers and not enough space. Born in 1899 to Italian immigrants in a tenement in the Navy Yard section of Brooklyn, young Al grows up dodging laundry lines and trading insults with kids who speak as many languages as there are pigeons on the windowsill. His father, Gabriele, is a barber. His mother, Teresa, a seamstress. They are not criminals. They are quiet, tired people with dreams of something bigger. Dreams that usually involve their sons going to school, getting decent jobs, and not ending up in prison or worse. But Brooklyn doesn't care about your parents' dreams. Brooklyn in the early 1900s is a street fight with sidewalks. Al is smart. Too smart, maybe. He learns fast. How to run errands, how to charm grown-ups, how to spot a mark. School, however, doesn't suit him. He quits before finishing the 6th grade. One too many beatings from teachers. One too many insults about being dumb Dago trash. He doesn't forget those words. What he does remember, though, is how respect is earned differently out here. Not through grades or gold stars, but by who you know, and who's willing to hit back for you. That's when Frankie Yale comes into his life. A local gangster with a devilish grin and a sharp suit, Yale runs a bar and a side business dealing in intimidation. And Capone? Capone is eager. He starts small, sweeping floors, running messages, keeping his ears open. It doesn't take long before Yale notices the kid isn't just eager, he's ruthless. Capone earns a nickname here, Scarface. There's debate over how exactly he got the scar. Many people still think that it happened during a bar fight when he insulted a woman and her brother slashed his face. 3 deep cuts on his left cheek. He never liked the nickname. Always preferred Snorky, slang for a sharp dresser. But the scar stuck, and so did the legend. Yale sends Capone on bigger jobs, muscle work, quiet intimidation. The kind of stuff that makes your fingers twitch when you shake hands. And Al proves he's not afraid. Not of guns, not of blood, not even of the police, who tend to look the other way if you know who to tip. But Brooklyn is getting too hot. Capone is making enemies, and his reputation is outgrowing Yale's bar. So when Johnny Torrio, another Brooklyn transplant making waves in Chicago, offers Al a way out, he takes it. It's 1919. Capone is 20 years old, and he boards a train headed west with a suitcase full of ambition and a past that's already catching up. Chicago is waiting. Now, you might be tempted to think of this as the part where he steps into greatness. But let's not pretend Chicago opens its arms right away. When Capone arrives, he's nobody. Just another tough with a Brooklyn accent and a scar he tries to hide behind a tilted hat. Johnny Torrio changes that. Torrio is calm, businesslike. If Capone is fire, Torrio is ice. He runs a tight operation under the old boss, Big Jim Colosimo. The city is still figuring itself out after World War I. Prohibition is starting to spread its roots, and Torrio sees something in Capone. Some mix of muscle and brain, of charm and cruelty. Capone becomes his right hand. He starts working the brothels first. Security, collections, customer relations, if you want to call it that. Not glamorous, but profitable. And Capone proves something valuable. He's reliable. He gets things done. He doesn't flinch. In those early Chicago years, Al builds his Rolodex. Politicians, cops, judges, bartenders, anyone with ears and influence. He buys drinks, hands out envelopes, tells jokes, and he listens closely. By the time Prohibition kicks in for real in 1920, Capone is ready. See? The 18th Amendment was supposed to clean up the country. It banned the sale, production, and transport of alcohol. But what it really did was hand the underworld a golden ticket. Torrio sees it coming. Capone helps build the infrastructure. They buy trucks. They bribe cops. They set up breweries in basements and back rooms. And suddenly, ordinary men are millionaires, on paper at least. And Capone? He's learning that the best gangsters don't shout. They smile. There's an early moment, told by someone who worked with him, where Capone, dressed in an oversized coat, steps into a new speakeasy and gets mistaken for a driver. The bartender waves him off. Capone smiles, leaves, and comes back an hour later, with the bartender's boss in tow. No shouting, just a look. The bartender is replaced the next day. That's Capone's way. Quiet warning, firm grip. No need to roar when a whisper will do. He moves into a modest apartment with his wife, May, and their son. Plays the family man during the day, rules the streets at night. And slowly, his name starts to grow. In whispers first. Then in headlines. By 1923, he's no longer Torrio's protege. He's the heir. But remember, he didn't take Chicago. He earned it, brick by brick, deal by deal, smile by smile. By 1925, Chicago is Capone's city in everything but name. The stockyards may still belong to the meat barons and the loop to the bankers, but everything else, nightclubs, breweries, gambling dens, even the whispers in back alleys, bows to him. And yet, Al Capone doesn't sit on his throne by force alone. He owes that to Johnny Torrio. Torrio is often overlooked in the stories, maybe because he wasn't flashy. No loud suits, no cigars puffing like locomotives, just calm calculation and a fondness for running crime like a well-oiled business. If Capone is the hammer, Torrio is the blueprint. The turning point comes on January 24th, 1925. Torrio steps out of his car, carrying a brown paper bag of oranges. He's back from a shopping trip with his wife. The moment he turns the key in the door, bang, gunfire. A rival gang sends him a message. They miss the kill, but they don't miss the point. Torrio is shot multiple times, including one in the jaw. He survives, but something inside him changes. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's fatigue, or maybe, as he later claims, it's the realization that Capone is already running things. He recovers slowly, and when he does, he calls Capone in. In a quiet room, bandages still wrapped around his face, Torrio hands him the reins. "It's yours now, kid," he says, or something close to it. There are no grand ceremonies, no champagne corks popping, no orchestras playing mob anthems. Just two men, one fading, one rising. Capone doesn't celebrate. He steps into the role as if it were waiting for him. He takes over everything: liquor distribution, gambling operations, the protection rackets, and the quiet control of police captains and judges. But he doesn't change the system. He just scales it. Capone's business model is terrifyingly simple: build alliances, kill those who say no, and buy everyone else. The 1920s in Chicago are a strange cocktail. One part jazz-age glitz, one part prohibition chaos. People are dancing the Charleston in smoke-filled speakeasies while bullets echo down alleyways. And Capone? He's somewhere in between, sipping imported whiskey behind bulletproof windows. He moves into the Metropole Hotel downtown, an entire floor to himself. Armed guards at the door, phones ringing all day, and a barber on call. Capone understands that image matters. If you're going to be a gangster, be the best dressed one. Newspapers start to cover him like a celebrity. They call him Scarface, a name he privately hates, and the big fellow, which he prefers. And everywhere he goes, reporters follow. He waves, gives quotes, makes jokes, always smiling, even when bodies are turning up in ditches. And he doesn't just control the underworld, he reshapes it. He forms partnerships with other syndicates, even those he once called enemies. Ethnic tensions between Irish, Italian, and Jewish gangs start to blur under Capone's influence. Money, after all, doesn't care about accents, but being the king isn't easy. The booze business is booming, sure, but so are the turf wars. Every neighborhood has a price, every bar a loyalty. And sometimes those loyalties shift. Capone knows this, and so he builds a structure around him. He appoints lieutenants, keeps books, has a system of couriers who memorize numbers instead of writing anything down. He also takes care of his people. When a lieutenant's wife falls ill, Capone pays the hospital bill. When a bartender's son is born, Capone sends a silver rattle and a $100 bill. These acts aren't just kind, they're insurance. Loyalty isn't demanded, it's purchased. But make no mistake, there's a line. If you cross it, there are no warnings. Just silence, then headlights, then a body that never gets found. By late 1925, Capone is no longer just a criminal. He's a public figure, a paradox. The man who provides jobs when the city can't, who gives food when the government fails, who smiles for cameras after ordering a dozen hits the week before. And while all of this unfolds, Torrio fades into the background. He moves to Brooklyn, quietly retires, and lives out his years mostly unbothered by the press or police. He plays the stock market, reads the paper, and watches as his protege becomes more famous and more dangerous than he ever imagined. Many people still think that Torrio remained involved, pulling strings behind the scenes. But those closest to Capone insist otherwise. Torrio knew when to leave the stage. Capone never did, and that's what made him a legend and a target. There's a quote someone once attributed to Capone: "May or may not be real. Doesn't matter. You can get more with a kind word and a gun than you can with just a kind word." That's how Capone runs Chicago now, and everyone knows it. If the Roaring Twenties have a soundtrack in Chicago, it's not jazz. It's the pop of gunfire. Prohibition has done something remarkable. It didn't stop people from drinking, It just made drinking illegal and profitable. And when you take a city already buzzing with corruption and pour in barrels of bootleg whiskey, what you get isn't a celebration. It's a war. Capone steps into the center of that war like a conductor. He doesn't invent violence. He just choreographs it. The early years of his reign are marked by what historians later call the beer wars. It sounds like a college prank, but in reality, it's an all-out bloodbath for control over the city's bootlegging trade. Rival gangs like the North Side Mob, led by Dino Banyan, aren't just competition. They're threats. And Capone doesn't tolerate threats. O'Banion is the first real challenge. He runs a flower shop as a front, selling roses by day, contracts for murder by night. He laughs at Capone, mocks him in public, calls him a soft Brooklyn boy playing gangster. Capone smiles, shrugs, waits. Then, on November 10th, 1924, 3 men enter O'Banion's flower shop. One of them pretends to buy chrysanthemums. The other 2 draw pistols. O'Banion dies behind the counter, with a white carnation still pinned to his lapel. The killing is precise, clean, almost surgical, and it starts a cycle that will define Capone's rule. Revenge comes fast. O'Banion's men, especially a man named Jaime Weiss, strike back. Bombings, drive-bys, machine gun ambushes that rattle windows and scatter pigeons off rooftops. It's not uncommon for shop owners to find their buildings peppered with bullets just because the wrong man walked by. Capone survives several attempts on his life. One particularly close call happens outside the Hawthorne Hotel in Cicero, where Capone has his office. A caravan of gunmen opens fire with Thompson submachine guns, Tommy guns they're called now, and dozens of rounds tear into the building. Capone ducks, survives, smiles the next day, and tightens his security. You'd think this would make him paranoid, but Capone responds with a strange mix of confidence and calculation. He doesn't just retaliate, he innovates. He begins sending out armored cars. He upgrades his convoys. His men begin to move in patterns, never using the same route twice. Safe houses are rotated weekly. Each lieutenant carries 2 pistols and 1 clean shirt, just in case the night turns messy. And Capone, he stays visible. He dines in public, tips generously, attends ball games. He understands something most gangsters don't. Visibility can be a kind of shield. The more people see him, the more the public starts to believe in the persona he crafts. That persona is part brute, part benefactor, and somehow it works. By 1926, Capone is making over $100 million a year from illegal booze, gambling, and vice operations. Adjusted for inflation? That's a modern tech company's worth. And this money is flowing through bars, laundromats, construction fronts, even through bakeries that never bake anything. But here's what makes Capone different. He doesn't hoard the wealth. He spreads it like fertilizer. Policemen receive weekly envelopes. City officials get donations. Judges find their mortgages paid mysteriously fast. And in neighborhoods like Cicero or Little Italy, families whisper blessings over meals bought with Capone money. That kind of loyalty can't be bought once. It has to be maintained. So Capone creates an empire built on fear. Yes, but also on reliability. He's the guy who pays on time, who protects your store if you keep your mouth shut, who'll make a call for your cousin if he lands in trouble. Of course, he'll also burn your building to the ground if you miss a payment, but people accept that. It's part of the code, and violence, when it comes, is often precise. Capone believes in sending messages, not making messes. One story that still circulates, though its truth is debated, goes like this. A bartender leaks information to the North Side gang. Capone invites him to lunch. The man eats steak, drinks wine, even laughs at a joke Capone tells. Then, as dessert is served, Capone nods. Two of his men walk in. The bartender never finishes his cannoli. Many people still think Capone ordered that kind of execution often. Others claim it was rare, reserved for traitors. So, what do you think? Was Capone a butcher, or just a man protecting his business? The press doesn't help the situation. They begin painting Capone as a mythical figure. Scarface, Chicago's underworld king, the headlines read. Capone dines while city burns. Reporters sneak into his court appearances, sketch his profile like he's a movie star, and speculate wildly on how many men he's had killed. Capone reads these articles, keeps clippings in a drawer, sometimes even sends corrections if the details are wrong. One paper misquotes the size of his operation. Capone sends a note. It's bigger. That balance between cold brutality and cheeky charm is what keeps him at the top. For now, it's a strange thing, really. How one man can terrify a city while still being invited to weddings, asked to sign autographs, and cheered in nightclubs. But that's Al Capone for you. He is, as people say, a man with two faces, and both are always watching. To the public, Capone is the man in the gray pinstripe suit, the wide-brimmed fedora tilted just so. He wears expensive silk ties and carries a gold pocket watch engraved with his initials. His shoes? Custom-made in Italy. Shined every day. He moves through the city like he owns it, because in a very real way, he does. He's known for tipping $100 for a $10 meal. He hands out coats to shivering children. There's even a story, probably half true, that he paid for a neighbor's funeral in full after hearing the family was too poor to bury their mother. He shows up at church on Easter Sunday with his mother on his arm, sits in the front pew, smiles gently, even shakes the priest's hand. And then, maybe an hour later, he's in a warehouse on the south side, quietly approving a contract to have a man tossed into the lake wearing cement shoes. That's the other face. The one few people see up close, and those who do don't always live to talk about it. Inside the inner circle, Capone doesn't shout. He rarely even raises his voice. He doesn't need to. When he gives an order, it's usually during lunch, over pasta, or during a card game. He's gotta go, is all he might say. And the men at the table understand. No details needed. His charisma is magnetic, sure, but there's a coldness beneath it. A calculating side that sees people not as friends or enemies, but as assets or liabilities. Allies one day, threats the next. Capone doesn't hate. He doesn't love. He respects, or he removes. Even his own bodyguards feel the chill. There's Frankie Rio, one of his most trusted men, tough, loyal, always within arm's reach. And yet, even Frankie knows not to relax around the boss. One wrong word, one careless slip, and Capone might smile at you today and bury you tomorrow. One of his former lieutenants once said, "You never really worked with Al. You worked under him, or you didn't work at all." At home, though, things are different. Capone's wife, May, is quiet, elegant in her own way. She doesn't ask about his business, never has. She's always been a stabilizing force, strong but distant. Their son, Sonny, is born with a partial hearing loss, something Capone never talks about publicly but takes seriously. He dotes on the boy, attends school plays, even bakes cookies once. Burns them too. There are soft moments, unexpected ones. He plays the banjo. Poorly. He reads comic strips aloud. He gardens. Yes, really. Roses mostly. His neighbors recall seeing him out early, pruning with shears in one hand and a cigar in the other. And in these moments, he doesn't look like a gangster. He looks like someone trying, maybe failing, but still trying to be something more. There's a famous story from 1927. Capone throws a Christmas party at a local orphanage, brings in musicians, toys, food, even a Santa suit. When one of the boys asks who he is, Capone just smiles and says, "I work for Santa." That kind of thing spreads. Whispers become stories, stories become legends, and the lines between fear and fondness blur. But if you were to ask Capone himself who he really is, he wouldn't answer. Not directly. He might offer a joke. "I'm just a businessman," he'd say, supplying a product the people want. Or sometimes he'd grow serious. Sit back, look you in the eye and say, "They made me the way I am. The city, the laws, all of it. I just played the cards I was dealt." There's an old photograph, grainy and cracked with age. It shows Capone sitting on the back patio of his home, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He's holding a newspaper in one hand and a lemonade in the other. His son is next to him, playing with a toy car. It's an image that doesn't make the papers, but it's real, and that's the part that keeps people up at night. Because the devil with the Tommy gun, he also gardens, he also smiles, he also loves his son. Many people still think Capone was just a killer wrapped in silk. Others argue he was more complicated, a product of poverty, violence, and a system that rewards boldness over goodness. So, what do you think? Was he a villain playing hero, or a survivor pretending to be king? Whatever the answer, Chicago in 1927 doesn't care. It doesn't want his truth. It just wants his liquor. And Capone, wearing both faces, is happy to deliver. Every empire has its throne room. For Capone, it's not made of gold or built high on a hill. It's a breakfast table, a wide wooden table in a house outside Chicago, usually set with eggs, toast, coffee, and a day's worth of power moves. Capone starts early. He's not a night owl like most gangsters are rumored to be. He likes the morning. Says it clears his head. He eats deliberately, knife and fork in hand, reading newspapers spread out like a general's war maps. His lieutenants come in and sit one by one, quiet, respectful, knowing the rhythm. They don't speak unless spoken to. And Capone, he doesn't speak until he's ready. He'll chew a bite, sip some coffee, wipe his mouth, and then start issuing commands. Move the stuff through Milwaukee this week. Tell O'Donnell he's got 3 days to pay. That judge? Send him a wedding gift. No card. No shouting. Just calm declarations between mouthfuls of buttered toast. This table becomes his war room, his court, his confessional. If you make it to the breakfast table, you matter. If you don't, well, people have been known to disappear after skipping a meal. Capone runs his empire like a CEO with a mean streak, and like any CEO, he needs structure. So, he builds an organization that mimics legitimate business. There are departments: liquor, gambling, protection, payroll, each with its own manager. They report upward. Problems are logged, solved, or buried. He even has an accountant, Jake Guzik, nicknamed Greasy Thumb. Soft-spoken, Jewish, and completely loyal. Guzik doesn't carry a gun. He carries numbers, and he knows where every dollar goes. Every bill is stashed. Every bribe is due. Together they turn the outfit into a machine. Money flows in from speakeasies, brothels, slot machines, and backroom dice games. Laundromats clean more than clothes. Grocery stores sell whiskey out the back. Even funeral homes are rumored to hold secret caches of cash. Capone's reach extends into unions, city councils, even police departments. His men control the trucks that deliver bread and booze. He pays attention to detail. He asks questions others miss. Who swept the sidewalk outside the Lexington Hotel yesterday? He might ask. Not because he cares about clean concrete, but because the man who sweeps is paid by the city. and Capone wants to know if his envelope arrived on time. But the breakfast table isn't just for business. Sometimes it's where Capone tests loyalty. He'll ask a man what he thinks of a rival. The right answer earns another meal. The wrong answer, silence, and maybe a polite nod toward the door. There's a story, again, half believed but repeated with reverence, of a new recruit who brags at the table. Talks too loud, names too many names. Capone listens, smiles, then sets his fork down and says, "You don't have breakfast with me anymore." The man is gone the next day, his name never spoken again. Fear doesn't need blood. Sometimes it just needs a cold cup of coffee. And yet, there are moments at this table that are oddly domestic. Capone's mother visits often. She speaks little English, prefers things simple. She brings cannoli, scolds him about his blood pressure, and tells the men to sit up straighter. They listen. May, his wife, sometimes brings their son in for a quick hello before school. Capone tousles Sonny's hair, cracks a small smile. It's jarring to see these two worlds collide. Power and gentleness, violence and routine. And that's the contradiction that defines Capone. He can order a hit while buttering a biscuit. He can laugh at a joke and then ruin a man's life with one whispered instruction. Many people still think Capone was emotionally detached, that he didn't feel guilt. But those closest to him describe occasional storms, nights when he'd stare out the window in silence, not speaking for hours. When asked what he was thinking, he'd simply say, "Too many ghosts." So what do you think? Was it remorse or just strategy? Another calculated pause in a long game. Meanwhile, outside the house, Chicago keeps moving. Truckloads of liquor cross state lines. Judges rule in Capone's favor without even hearing cases. Competitors fall like dominoes, some to bullets, some to bribes. Capone's name becomes a kind of shorthand, a threat, a promise, a brand. You don't mess with Capone, not because he'll kill you himself, but because someone, somewhere will see to it. A doorman, a delivery boy, a cousin's cousin. The outfit doesn't sleep. And at the heart of it all is that breakfast table. No throne, no crown. Just a man in a robe, chewing bacon, deciding who lives and who vanishes. Across town, the snow begins to melt in the gutters, and spring creeps into Chicago like a thief with soft shoes. But peace doesn't come with it. Because as Capone's empire expands, so does the resistance. And the loudest voice of that resistance? The North Side Gang. After Dean O'Banion's assassination, the gang doesn't crumble. It mutates, becomes meaner, sharper, more organized. Jaime Weiss steps up first, all nerves and vengeance, leading with a kind of icy fury that even Capone respects. Then comes Bugs Moran, wild, unpredictable, and dangerously persistent. Capone hates unpredictability. It's messy, risky, and Moran, more in his chaos in suspenders. The conflict becomes a deadly game of chess, played with real pawns and very loud bishops. Bombings rock businesses tied to Capone. Drive-bys target his nightclubs. One week, 3 of his associates are killed in broad daylight. The message is loud. The North Side isn't afraid. Capone responds the only way he knows how, with precision and patience. He strengthens alliances, builds networks deeper into Cicero and beyond, ensuring that every cop, judge, and alderman in his orbit knows which side their bread is buttered on. And if not, well, accidents happen. He also increases surveillance. Yes, in the 1920s, gangster surveillance. Capone's men tail rival gang members. They eavesdrop in cafes. They bribe bartenders to drop names and servers to record table orders. He wants to know everything about Moran's movements, where he eats, who he trusts, what time he takes his car for a wash. It's obsessive and effective, But the north side won't go quietly. In 1926, Capone's car is ambushed in front of the Hawthorne Hotel. Gunmen unload over 1,000 rounds. The building looks like a brick sponge afterward. By sheer luck or careful design, Capone isn't hit. He doesn't run. He doesn't panic. He strengthens his windows. He doubles his guards. He moves his family to a safer location. And he gets quiet. That's always the worst sign, when Capone gets quiet, because he doesn't forget, ever. That's what makes the next part so chilling. February 14th, 1929, Valentine's Day. While couples exchange chocolates and awkward glances, Capone's enemies line up inside a garage at 2122 North Clark Street. Moran's crew, 7 men in all, are there, expecting a delivery. Instead, 2 men dressed as police officers enter, followed by 2 more in plain clothes. No one resists. Who resists the police? The 7 are lined up against a brick wall. Then the machine guns come out. 70 bullets are fired. It's called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and it sends a chill through the entire country. The photographs become infamous. Bodies slumped, blood pooling, hats knocked loose. Even newspapers overseas run the story. It's the kind of violence that stops being a story and starts becoming mythology. Capone isn't even in Chicago. He's vacationing in Miami, sipping citrus drinks and reportedly fishing in the sun. When asked about the massacre, he shrugs. "I didn't order nothing." Legally, no one can prove he did, but everyone knows. Even if Capone didn't give the order directly, it came from within his circle. It had his fingerprints all over it. Calculated, brutal, and public enough to send a message that would echo for decades. But here's the thing that surprises people. The massacre doesn't win the war. It doesn't even end the North Side gang. Bugs Moran survives. He was late to the meeting, and keeps the fight alive, though his power begins to wane. Capone's men still get shot at. The city doesn't breathe easier. Instead, the massacre backfires in one crucial way. It makes Capone too visible, too loud, too obvious, too much. He's no longer the generous racketeer or the friendly bootlegger. He's a mass murderer in a suit. The papers turn against him. Politicians are pressured to act. And in Washington, someone whispers a dangerous word: taxes. Yet for now, Capone still walks the streets, still eats breakfast with his crew, still throws cash to beggars and laughs with his tailor, because in his mind, the war may be noisy, but he's still winning. And in a way, he's right. Many people still think the St. Valentine's Day Massacre marked the beginning of Capone's downfall. But the truth is messier. It marked something else entirely. The end of anonymity. The end of illusion. From here on out, there's no turning back. Al Capone is no longer a man. He's a symbol, and symbols can't hide forever. By now, Chicago's underworld is no longer a street brawl. It's an empire. And Capone? Capone's the emperor. But even emperors need pillars. He can't be everywhere. Can't check every truck, sit in on every card game, or shake every judge's hand. That's where Frank Nitti and Tony Accardo come in. Nitti, known as the Enforcer, is short, sharp-eyed, and quiet. He's not flashy like Capone, not as charming either, but he's efficient. When you owe money, it's Nitti who knocks. When someone needs reminding that the outfit is watching, Nitti doesn't yell. He smiles, a cold, brittle smile that freezes rooms. He's Capone's right hand in a very literal sense. Nitti keeps the books balanced, the shipments moving, the muscle tight and quiet. He's in charge of making sure everything stays exactly how Capone wants it. Smooth, fast, invisible. And then there's Tony Accardo. They call him Joe Batters. Supposedly, after Capone watched him bludgeon 3 men with a baseball bat and said, almost admiringly, "Boy, this kid sure is a Joe Batters." Whether true or not, the nickname sticks. Accardo is younger, calmer, and deadly serious. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, people listen. He's not impulsive, he's strategic. Where Nitti handles the present, Accardo's watching the future. Together, they form the backbone of the outfit. They keep the machine humming while Capone walks the front of the stage, lighting cigars with $100 bills and charming reporters like he's auditioning for Broadway. The division of labor is as elegant as it is sinister. Capone shakes hands. Nitti breaks them. Accardo makes sure no one hears it. This balance allows Capone to maintain the dual image he's carefully crafted. The benevolent king in public, and the bloodless general behind closed doors. It's not just effective, it's theatrical. And Capone loves a good show. Every major operation has layers of redundancy. If a truck is hijacked, there's another already en route. If a cop grows a conscience, he's reassigned or retired early. If a judge hints at making trouble, his campaign fund mysteriously dries up. Capone is a master of redundancy, and more importantly, delegation. At one point, he reportedly says, "I don't have to know how the whiskey gets there. I just need to know it does." That's Nitti's job. That's Accardo's job, and they're very, very good at it. Of course, the work isn't all clean. There are mistakes, betrayals, slips in the chain. When that happens, Nitti responds first. He doesn't get emotional. He doesn't argue. He simply removes the problem. There's a tale, perhaps apocryphal, about a man who skimmed from the numbers racket. Nothing major, just a few $100s here and there. Enough to matter. Nitti walks into the man's bar one night, orders a drink, tips well, and as the bartender turns to make change, crack. A single shot, quiet and clean. Then Nitti finishes his drink and walks out. The bar reopens the next day under new ownership, and that's the point. Capone rarely gets his hands dirty anymore. He doesn't need to. That's what lieutenants are for. His hands are too busy holding cigars and waving at photographers. Still, he knows everything. If a man is late twice, Capone knows. If a rival opens a new speakeasy, Capone hears. He reads reports like a CEO, highlighting margins, approving raises, noting trends. He even has a filing system. Paper trails are dangerous, yes, but controlled information is power. Inside the outfit, the culture is almost military. There are ranks, uniforms of sorts, even rituals. New men are tested, not with violence, but with silence. They're watched. Their loyalty measured not by what they say, but what they don't say. There's also superstition. Some of Capone's men carry rabbit's feet. Others avoid certain streets on certain days. Capone himself is said to change routes on a whim, not out of paranoia, but out of instinct. Many people still think Capone ruled with brute force alone. But the truth is, his real weapon was structure. He turned chaos into a flowchart. He managed crime the way Ford managed assembly lines, and it worked. In the background of all this, always, is the press. Capone makes headlines like no one else. When he steps out of a car, cameras flash. When he speaks, papers print every word. He plays to it too, dresses sharp, stays just within the law, just enough to avoid easy arrests. But his name is everywhere now, synonymous with Chicago, with crime, with power, and slowly, that visibility becomes a burden. Because while Nitti and Accardo keep the shadows neat and tidy, the light on Capone is starting to burn. The newspapers love him at first. How could they not? Al Capone is made for headlines. He's flashy, quotable, and always, always somewhere interesting. A gangster who smiles at reporters, who kisses babies in Little Italy and sends flowers to accident victims. That's front-page gold. But Capone doesn't just tolerate the media. He manages them. He invites journalists to his parties. He remembers their names, their wives' names, their favorite scotch. He tips them like waiters. and they repay him with glowing prose. Chicago's Robin Hood, the benevolent beer baron, the mobster with a heart. It's all carefully crafted theater. He knows what he's doing. If people like you, they make excuses for you. If they adore you, they defend you. Capone isn't just bribing cops. He's seducing public opinion. He gives interviews, offers sound bites, flashes that disarming half smile. When asked about the violence in Chicago, he leans in and says, "I'm just a businessman, giving the people what they want. If the government can't do it, someone has to." It's absurd, it's brilliant, and it works. In 1927, Capone is everywhere. Magazines, cartoons, editorials. Reporters show up at the Lexington Hotel, just hoping for a quote. Sometimes he obliges. Sometimes he sends out sandwiches instead. He understands narrative. He controls his. When a photo emerges of Capone leaving a courthouse, he reportedly says, "Print the one with the smile, not the sneer." They do. He even starts to curate his criminal image, leaks stories about charity, about how he paid for a church roof or helped a sick child get medical care. True? Maybe. Doesn't matter. It feeds the myth. But not everyone is buying it. Behind the scenes, editors are growing nervous. Politicians are applying pressure. The public mood begins to shift, subtly at first. People who once praised Capone now mumble. Questions creep in. Who really pays for all this? Didn't that alderman disappear after meeting with him? Is it true what they say about the warehouse on 47th? And the press starts to pivot. The headlines change tone. Mobster Al Capone dodges charges again. Chicago's most dangerous man walks free. Capone laughs while bodies pile up. The narrative he's worked so hard to shape is slipping out of his hands. And worse, people outside of Chicago are starting to notice. In Washington, officials are whispering. Treasury agents are taking notes. Hoover is fuming. Capone, once a Chicago problem, is becoming a national embarrassment. But Capone doesn't flinch. Instead, he leans harder into the image game. He throws bigger parties. He funds more charity dinners. He tips everyone within reach and smiles so wide it almost hurts. And in 1931, he opens the soup kitchen. Free soup, coffee, and donuts for the unemployed, the sign reads. It's not subtle. It's not even modest. But it hits like a drumbeat. Capone knows what the Depression has done to this city. Bread lines stretch for blocks. Fathers cry behind newspapers. Children skip school to stand in line for potatoes. And now, here he is, feeding them. No questions asked. He hires photographers to capture the line. Make sure every paper gets a clean shot of a grateful citizen receiving hot soup. It's not just PR. It's a masterpiece. Many people still think Capone did it to win favor before his trial. Maybe he did. Maybe he truly cared. About the poor, about the hungry. He certainly looked like he did. So what do you think? Was it kindness? Or just the sharpest kind of manipulation? Whatever the truth, the result is the same. People remember. Even decades later, elderly Chicagoans recall Capone's kitchen with strange fondness. The man who once lit up a ballroom with champagne also gave them soup when no one else would. He was, they say, the devil who fed us. And the devil knew how to pose for the camera. There's a moment, a quiet one, that rarely makes the books. Capone stands at the back of the line one morning, hands in his coat pockets, watching the crowd shuffle forward. No cameras this time, no entourage, just a man watching other men eat. He doesn't speak, doesn't smile. Then slowly he turns and walks away, maybe thinking about the next move, maybe wondering when the press will stop printing photos and start printing subpoenas. Or maybe, just maybe, he's thinking about what happens when the spotlight turns cold. The soup kitchen opens each morning with the hiss of boiling broth and the soft scrape of folding chairs on tile. No matter how early you arrive, there's always someone already waiting, huddled under coats too thin for the wind, scarves pulled up over cracked lips. They don't talk much, not out of fear, out of hunger. Inside, the kitchen hums like a small city. Volunteers, some paid by Capone, some simply grateful, move like clockwork. One stirs the soup, one cuts the bread, two serve coffee from oversized aluminum urns. No one dares speak Capone's name above a whisper, but everyone knows this is his place. The building itself isn't much, just an old storefront with painted-over windows and a crooked door. But inside, the smells are warm. A little meat, a little onion, a whiff of old sugar. It's not gourmet, but it's hot. And in 1931 Chicago, that makes it sacred. People file in, coats heavy with snow, hands trembling from cold or nerves. They move quietly, eyes down. A bowl of soup, a slice of bread, maybe two if someone behind the counter is feeling generous, coffee if there's still some left, and on good days, a donut, dense, dry, and perfect. And then they sit, on benches, on crates, on anything solid. They eat quickly, quietly. No one lingers. There's something sacred in the silence. Every now and then Capone shows up. Not every day, just enough. He comes dressed like any other patron, sometimes in an overcoat and scarf, sometimes in a flat cap pulled low. He walks the line. He shakes hands, pats shoulders, offers a warm, "Take care now," or "Glad you came." It's theater. Yes, but it's also oddly human. There's a story, told by an old man years later, that Capone once slipped a $5 bill into his coat pocket as he passed, saying, "For the baby, huh?" The man didn't have a child, didn't even know why Capone said it. He cried anyway. That's the power of hunger. It makes kindness feel holy, but this kindness comes with a smell. Not from the soup, but from something just beneath the surface. Power. You can almost taste it, because Capone isn't just feeding the hungry, he's feeding something else too, perception. In a time when the government is handing out pink slips and soup lines stretch for blocks, here's Al Capone, serving meals and shaking hands. The mayor might ignore you. Capone won't. That has weight. That sticks, and he knows it. There are whispers that he even times his visits with newspaper photographers, that he stages the line when big donors or foreign reporters come by, that he orders the kitchen to make the soup a little thicker on photo days. Are they true? Many people still think so. Others argue it's exaggerated, just another layer of myth. So what do you think? Can an act be both generous and self-serving? Can a man be both sinner and savior? One morning, a woman faints in line. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. Capone's men lift her gently, carry her inside, lay her on a cot near the stove. She wakes to broth being spooned into her mouth by a quiet volunteer in a heavy coat. No camera catches it, no reporter prints it, but she never forgets. And years later, when asked who helped her most during the Depression, she doesn't say Roosevelt. She doesn't say the mayor. She says Al. The kitchen also serves another purpose, one most people never see. It's a listening post. Capone's men walk the line. They chat. They listen. They learn. Who's grumbling? Who's planning something stupid? Who's talking to the feds? The kitchen becomes a kind of reverse confessional. People let their guard down over warm soup, and Capone learns more from 5 minutes in that line than he could from a dozen spies. Even the FBI will later admit, Capone knew what was happening in Chicago before they did. That's the genius of the soup kitchen. It's not just charity, it's strategy. It's optics, it's intelligence, and yes, it's insurance. Because when the newspapers print rumors, Capone points to the line. When the cops come sniffing, he gestures toward the stew pot. When someone asks what kind of man he is, he just says, "I feed the people." And most nights that's enough. But even Capone can't feed everyone. The Depression deepens. more families come. Some sleep in alleys the night before just to make it in time. Children stand barefoot in the snow, bowls in hand, not understanding the politics of it all, just wanting something warm. Capone keeps the kitchen running. It's not always perfect. The soup gets thin, bread runs out. Volunteers get scared and quit, but still the door's open every morning. Every single morning. There's one last story from the kitchen. An old man, blind in one eye, coat held together with string, comes every day. Says nothing, eats alone, nods once, and leaves. One afternoon he doesn't show. The next morning, Capone himself asks, "Where's the old guy with the blue scarf?" No one answers. Capone doesn't say anything more, but a new coat arrives at the kitchen the next week. Thick wool with a bright blue scarf. They hang it by the door, just in case. He never returns, but the coat stays there. And maybe that's Capone's softest power of all. Not in what he takes, but what he remembers. Inside the warm hum of Capone's soup kitchen, most people don't notice the black cars parked down the block. They don't see the men in plain coats sipping coffee too slowly, taking notes in little leather books, or staring just a second too long at each face that walks in. But the federal government does. By 1931, Capone's visibility is a liability. His liability. He's made himself a symbol, and now the system wants to make an example of him. Not because of murder, not because of smuggling or bootlegging, but because of what those silent black cars are watching for: paper. The Internal Revenue Service, of all places, is building a case. While the public watches Capone hand out soup, federal agents are watching his bank accounts, hunting for proof that while millions of dollars flow through the outfit's veins, Capone himself isn't paying so much as a dime in income tax. It's slow work, painstaking, but it's working. Behind the scenes, an unlikely army is gathering. Accountants, auditors, paper pushers with eyeglasses and briefcases, far removed from Tommy guns or whiskey crates. Their weapons are receipts. Their battleground is the filing cabinet, and they're coming for Capone. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Al Capone, master of the underworld, whose enemies have been found face down in alleyways and floating in the Chicago River, may go down over numbers he never even wrote himself. The problem? His lifestyle doesn't match his filings. Capone doesn't hide his wealth. He flaunts it. Tailored suits, luxury cars, hotel suites, private boxes at ball games. He tells reporters he's just a furniture dealer, which would be hilarious if it weren't so transparent. He lives like royalty, but royalty still has to pay taxes. And while Capone thinks the soup kitchen makes him look untouchable, it does something else entirely. It makes him easier to watch. See, while the kitchen feeds the poor, it also draws attention. There's foot traffic, names, faces, deliveries. Money changes hands. And where there's activity, there are patterns. Capone may keep his name off the paperwork, but patterns don't lie. Agents from the Treasury Department, particularly one named Frank Wilson, begin assembling a picture. Bank records, property holdings, payments made in cash, deposits made under aliases. All of it points toward a man living off unreported income. The evidence starts to stack, slowly, quietly, with no headlines. Capone's inner circle doesn't even notice at first. Or if they do, they don't care. They've faced worse than paperwork. What can the IRS do that bullets haven't? But the IRS doesn't blink, doesn't sleep, doesn't flinch, and it doesn't forget. The weirdest part? Capone knows they're watching. He jokes about it. Laughs when agents tail his car. Offers them cigars. Once, reportedly, he sends a plate of sandwiches out to a surveillance van parked near his hotel. "You boys hungry?" he calls out, grinning. It's not arrogance. It's faith. a belief that he can still charm his way out of anything, that money will talk, that his soup kitchen will speak louder than their evidence. And for a while, he's right. Every time a story leaks about a potential case, Capone's lawyers fire back. No proof, no signature, no crime. Meanwhile, Capone keeps hosting charity dinners, keeps smiling for cameras, keeps throwing lavish parties in Miami, while the feds comb through piles of ledgers looking for one mistake. Just one, but not all mistakes are written in ink. Some are flesh and blood. A man named Leslie Shumway enters the picture, a former bookkeeper for one of Capone's gambling outfits. Not particularly brave, not particularly important, until he gets scared. He flips, testifies, gives the IRS everything they need to bridge the gap between Capone's wealth and his silence on taxes. Suddenly, Capone's smile starts to strain. Lawyers are called. Meetings are held at odd hours. And slowly, Capone begins to understand something terrifying. This isn't a raid he can bribe his way out of. This isn't a rival he can shoot. This is federal arithmetic. Many people still think the government targeted Capone out of desperation, that they couldn't convict him for murder or bootlegging, so they went for the next best thing, his wallet. And they're not wrong. But the brilliance of the tax angle is that it's indisputable. You either filed or you didn't. You either declared the income or you lied. And Capone? He never filed a return. He'd built an empire, funded a private army, bribed a city, without ever checking the box marked income. So what do you think? Is that oversight or hubris? And yet, through all of it, the soup kitchen stays open. No matter how many subpoenas are filed, no matter how many agents tail his car, Capone still makes sure the broth is warm and the bread is sliced. He knows he's being hunted, but he also knows something else. Chicago still eats, and when people eat, they remember. He's betting that when the trial comes, the public won't see a gangster. They'll see the man who gave them soup. By mid-1931, Al Capone's name is carved into the consciousness of every American household. Part gangster, part ghost story, part tabloid king. But somewhere in a quiet federal office, men in suits are gathering everything they need to bring the show to an end. And it isn't loud. There's no dramatic raid, no courtroom ambush. Just one small piece of paper sliding across a desk. An indictment. The charge? Tax evasion. The case file, thick with receipts, testimonies, and bank statements, isn't flashy, but it's devastating. Capone has never filed a tax return in his life. He's raked in millions. He lives lavishly. His legitimate income, practically nil. The most dangerous man in America is about to face his most dangerous enemy, a calculator. The federal government begins to move quickly now. They know Capone still has power, enough to sway juries, pay off lawmen, even twist public sympathy. So they strike hard, and they strike smart. June 5th, 1931. Capone is arrested and formally charged, not with murder, not with bootlegging, but with evading taxes between 1924 and 1929. The media explodes. The headline alone reads like a punchline. Al Capone, charged with dodging taxes. It sounds absurd. This is the man who orchestrated murders, ran Chicago's underworld, survived assassination attempts, and now he's facing prison time because he didn't fill out Form 1040. But Capone knows it's real, and it terrifies him, because bullets can be dodged. But books are forever. Inside the outfit, panic bubbles beneath the surface. Some lieutenants urge Capone to flee. Others insist he can still beat the charges. But Capone, for once, hesitates. His lawyers, well-paid, well-dressed, and increasingly nervous, begin crafting a defense. The strategy? Claim Capone doesn't manage the books, that he has no idea how much money he makes, that he's just a businessman with no direct link to the ledgers the feds are salivating over. It's flimsy, they know it, but Capone's confidence doesn't waver publicly. He walks into the courtroom in a tailored blue suit, smiling, waving to reporters, chatting with photographers like it's opening night at the theater, and yet, beneath the surface, he's sweating. The public watches with fascination. The same man who ran soup kitchens is now seated in a courtroom, staring down charts and ledgers, while agents read off his earnings like a bedtime story. They hear about cash stashed in wall safes, hotel suites rented for months at a time, luxury cars paid for with bundles of unmarked bills. There's one particular moment, small, even laughable, when an agent reads off the number of silk shirts Capone ordered in a single year. The courtroom chuckles. Even Capone smirks. But it's not funny, because each shirt, each steak, each car is one more nail in the coffin. They're not trying to prove he's a gangster. They're proving he's rich, and that he lied about it. The defense does their best to cloud the issue. They argue the income is hearsay, that the numbers are inflated, that witnesses are unreliable. But none of it sticks. One by one, federal accountants, some no older than Capone's own son, take the stand with a quiet, methodical fury. And the crowd? They watch with awe. It's not guns or shootouts. It's math, and it's working. Meanwhile, Capone's inner circle is unraveling. Informants begin to surface. Low-level guys looking to cut deals, survive another day. The kitchen staff starts noticing men in hats loitering outside again. Agents, journalists, rivals. Even Capone's own guards are starting to look over their shoulders. The invincible man has become vulnerable, and yet the soup kitchen still opens. The stew still simmers, and Capone still smiles when he walks through the line, shaking hands, tipping waitresses, telling children to stay in school. But now, he moves slower, talks less. And when no one's looking, his shoulders sag just a little. Many people still think Capone was shocked by the strength of the government's case, but others say he always knew it would end like this, that the moment he opened that soup kitchen, made himself into a symbol, he became too big not to fall. So what do you think? Was he blindsided, or did he see the noose tightening and just hope to smile through it? Either way, the message is clear now. They're not coming for Scarface. They're coming for Alphonse Gabriel Capone, citizen, taxpayer, or more importantly, non-taxpayer. The most dangerous man in America has finally met someone who doesn't need a gun to beat him, just a pencil and patience. The trial begins like a stage play. Everyone already knows the ending to, and yet people line up around the block just to watch it unfold. Al Capone, dressed to the nines, still carrying himself like he owns the courtroom, walks in each day with that same smile. The one that made reporters swoon and made aldermen sweat. But this time, no one's swooning. No one's sweating for him. They're watching, waiting, hoping, because this isn't just a trial anymore. It's a referendum, a reckoning, a message from the government to every man who thought he could hide behind charm, money, or influence. Capone has brought the show. Now the IRS is bringing the curtain down. Frank Wilson, the lead investigator, sits silently at the front of the courtroom, surrounded by boxes of paperwork. He's not a flashy man. No trench coat, no hard-boiled detective lines. Just a quiet, methodical thinker. The kind of guy who you might not notice at a party, but who will remember everything you said 3 days later. He's spent years building this case, and now, with quiet confidence, he lays it all out, one receipt at a time, one signature at a time, one inconsistent bank deposit at a time. There's no jury-friendly drama here. No smoking guns, just ledgers, numbers, and patterns. Boring on paper, deadly in court. Capone's defense team tries to confuse the matter. They claim the records are forged, that Capone wasn't responsible for the financial dealings of his organization, that it was all handled by underlings, bookkeepers, cashiers, street-level runners. Capone, they argue, is just the face. But the government has something else. Capone's own words, casual remarks made to reporters, boasts in hotel lobbies, handwritten notes, even off-the-cuff jokes about earning more than the president. In a world of tax law, boasting is dangerous. And then, just when Capone thinks he still has a fighting chance, the government pulls its best move yet. They change the jury, literally. At the last minute, the entire jury is replaced. Rumors had already swirled about bribes, threats, and quiet visits to jurors' homes in the dead of night. So the judge, in a stunning move, swaps in a new panel. Fresh faces, hand-picked in secrecy. The courtroom gasps. Capone's lawyers go pale. Capone? For the first time in a long time, he doesn't smile. The trial moves faster after that. The jury listens. Not to drama, not to tales of gang wars or speakeasies, but to facts. They watch Capone, flanked by his lawyers, looking just a little too polished, just a little too rehearsed. The image that had protected him for years is cracking. No more soup kitchen headlines. No more smiling for the front page. Just numbers. On October 17th, 1931, the verdict comes in. Guilty. The crowd outside the courthouse breaks into cheers. Inside, reporters scribble like mad, and agents begin preparing paperwork. Capone? He says nothing, just blinks. Then finally, his smile fades. The sentence is steep. 11 years in federal prison, $50,000 in fines, and over $200,000 in owed taxes and interest. For Capone, it's not just a punishment, it's an exile. Because now, the man who once ruled Chicago can't even decide when to eat lunch. The public reaction is mixed. Some cheer, some cry, some can't believe it. How could a man who fed the city, who fought prohibition with flair, who laughed and tipped and seemed like one of them, how could he be dragged away like this? Others say justice has finally come, that for all the murders that went unpunished, for all the corruption that was never proven, the law found its opening and took it. Many people still think the tax conviction was a trick, that the real crimes went unpunished. But in the eyes of the law, it didn't matter how they got him, they got him. So what do you think? Was it enough? Or was it just the only way? One final detail gets overlooked by most papers. Even after the conviction, the soup kitchen stays open. For a few months anyway. Capone's lieutenants keep it running, quietly, modestly, almost as a tribute. And some days, men in ragged coats still line up, hoping, just hoping, that Al might step out of the shadows and smile again. He doesn't. The throne is gone. The king is caged. But for a little while longer, the soup still warms the city. They take him first to Cook County Jail, and for a moment, it feels like the city holds its breath. Al Capone, Scarface, the man who once signed contracts with a wink and a nod, is now just a number behind bars. But Cook County is only a layover. In May 1932, he's transferred to the United States Penitentiary in Atlanta, a modern facility, sterile and impersonal, with high walls and colder stairs. There are no friends here, no bellboys to carry his bags, no waiters slipping him extra olives. Here, Capone is stripped of silk and swagger, given a plain uniform, a bed, a schedule, and a job. Yes, Al Capone has to work. The prison assigns him to the basement. Laundry duty, 8 hours a day, sorting sheets, folding uniforms, piling towels into neat, humble stacks. The same hands that once signed off on hits are now wringing out cotton soaked with institutional soap. He's miserable, but he doesn't show it. Not at first. Capone tries to play the role, smiles, shakes hands, offers compliments to guards and inmates alike. He jokes about being the best-dressed man to ever do laundry. And for a while, some inmates are charmed. He's still Capone, after all, but the charm doesn't last, Because in here, his name doesn't carry weight. Nobody cares how much he made, who he killed, or what fancy suits he wore. In prison, you're measured by different rules. How you carry yourself, how hard you work, how quiet you stay. And Capone? He doesn't stay quiet. He complains, grows agitated, gets into petty arguments. Rumors start circulating that he's not well. Not physically, not mentally. And it's true, the man is changing. For years, Capone's health had been quietly eroding, a shadow he refused to acknowledge. He'd picked up syphilis in his early 20s, long before the days of penicillin. It had gone untreated, festering quietly, doing its work. Now, in the structured silence of Atlanta, that shadow starts to show its teeth. He grows forgetful, confused, easily frustrated. He snaps at guards, misplaces his shoes, talks to himself. At first, people think it's an act. The tough guy trying to feign illness, maybe angle for a better cell or an early release. But doctors confirm it. Neurosyphilis. His brain is deteriorating. One guard describes seeing Capone staring at a wall for hours, murmuring to himself, replaying conversations no one else can hear. Another inmate recalls him folding and unfolding a single handkerchief for half a day, whispering something about needing it pressed for dinner, though no dinner was coming. Capone's decline is slow but unmistakable. His memory begins to slip. He repeats stories from a decade ago as if they happened yesterday. He writes letters to people who died long ago. Frank Nitti visits once and reportedly leaves in silence, shaken. Capone is still walking, still breathing. But the man who once ruled Chicago, he's fading. And yet, even in this fog, bits of the old Al remain. He still hums jazz tunes under his breath. He still tries to tip guards, usually with imaginary money. He tells jokes that make no sense, then laughs so hard he weeps. He offers to make a call for a fellow inmate, then forgets what he was talking about mid-sentence. It's heartbreaking and strangely peaceful, because for all the bloodshed and betrayal, all the money and murder, Capone's prison years are defined by something rare in his life: stillness. The government watches him decay with a mix of satisfaction and discomfort. Yes, they brought him down. But no one expected this. No one imagined the lion would become a man folding laundry, staring at walls and calling every guard kid. Many people still think this was the final punishment. That prison didn't just strip Capone of his freedom, but his mind. Others argue he was never well to begin with. That the violence, the paranoia, the need for control were all signs of something broken long ago. So what do you think? Was Capone always on this path, or did the cage create the cracks? Eventually, the government decides he's no longer a threat, not to society, not even to himself. In 1939, after serving roughly 7.5 years of his sentence, Capone is released. Not because he's innocent, but because he's finished. He's not the same man who walked into that courtroom with a grin. He's not the man who ran a city from a breakfast table. He's not even sure who he is anymore. But he still remembers one thing: the soup kitchen. He talks about it often, to anyone who'll listen, like it's his legacy, like it's the one good thing he left behind. Capone's release doesn't make headlines the way his conviction did. No parades, no speeches, just a quiet note in the papers. Alphonse Capone, paroled. Health condition, poor. He's 48 years old, but he looks older. Much older. Thinner now. Slower. His walk has a shuffle to it, and his face, once full and ruddy from whiskey and cigars, has gone soft and pale. His eyes no longer gleam the way they used to. He returns to his family in Palm Island, Florida, a private estate surrounded by tropical calm and the soft hush of water against dock pilings. A strange place for a man who once ruled Chicago. But it suits him now, because Capone is no longer a king. He's a memory. His wife, May, welcomes him quietly. She's aged too, worn by the years and the absence and the rumors, but she still cares. She still believes, perhaps, in the good that was buried beneath the violence. Their son, Sonny, visits often. He's a grown man now. He speaks softly to his father, sometimes repeating himself 3 or 4 times before Capone responds. Doctors continue to treat him. There are nurses, too, private ones, paid well to keep him comfortable, to administer injections, to explain the same facts again and again. Mr. Capone, it's Tuesday. Mr. Capone, yes, your name is Alphonse. Mr. Capone, the soup kitchen is closed now. He spends his days walking slowly around the garden, occasionally sitting beneath a palm tree with a fedora resting on his lap. He talks to birds, waves at boats, hums old jazz melodies, and sometimes, when the sky is just the right color, he whispers names no one else remembers anymore. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when the fog lifts. When he sits up straight and says something that sounds like the old owl. Did we get those crates to Cicero? Or, tell Nitty the schedule's changed. But then the mist rolls back in, and the man who once ran Chicago is gone again. His guests now are fewer and fewer. Old associates stay away, some out of caution, others because they simply can't bear to see him like this. Frank Nitti never visits again. Tony Accardo sends a few notes, polite and cold. The new generation of the outfit has moved on, cleaner, quieter, and far more careful than Capone ever was. They learn from his mistakes. They watch him like a ghost story told over whiskey. A warning wrapped in pinstripes. He watches the world change from a wicker chair on the patio. Radio becomes television. The war begins, then ends. And Capone? He doesn't understand much of it, but he still tells the same stories. I used to help people, he says. Fed 'em, you know that? Me. He becomes obsessed with the kitchen again. Not the violence, not the money, just the soup. He asks daily if it's ready. He tells the nurse to double the bread today, and every evening, just before bed, he asks the same question. Did they all get fed? And no matter how the nurse answers, he always nods and says, good, that's good. Many people still think he found peace in those final years, but others say it wasn't peace. It was forgetting. So what do you think? Is it better to fade into silence or to remember it all? In January 1947, Capone suffers a stroke. His body fails the way his mind did years earlier, gradually, then all at once. He clings to life for a few days, mostly unconscious, his breathing ragged and slow. On January 25th, with May at his side, Alphonse Gabriel Capone dies. The man who once controlled half a city passes in silence. No gunfire, no headlines, just the soft sound of water lapping against the dock and the distant cry of a seabird. And now, let the story slow. Let the noise of the city fade. Let the clatter of trial doors, the echo of gunshots, the clink of glass bottles, all drift away. Picture Capone once more, standing at the door of that kitchen, holding a ladle in a steady hand, nodding gently as each person passes. That's how some remember him, not as a gangster, but as a man handing out soup on a cold Chicago day. Maybe you believe it, maybe you don't. Either way, he's gone now, and the night is quiet again. It's a strange kind of silence that follows Capone's death. The city doesn't erupt in grief. The streets don't flood with mourners. In fact, most of Chicago just keeps going. Streetcars humming, papers printing, factory whistles blowing. The legend is gone, but the machinery he built, still running. The outfit doesn't crumble with Capone's passing. That's the part people forget. Capone may have lit the match, but others carried the flame, more quietly, more carefully, and with far less attention. Frank Nitti steps in first. The enforcer becomes the frontman, but he's not the kind of boss who throws lavish parties or smiles for reporters. Nitti operates in the shadows, keeping the outfit profitable but discreet. He understands what Capone never did. Power grows best in silence. Under Nitti, the violence cools. The headlines disappear. The name Outfit replaces Capone's gang. They begin investing in legitimate businesses. Clean fronts, real estate, even Hollywood. By the late 1940s, the Chicago mob is stronger than ever. Only now, it doesn't need to be loud. It already owns the room. And what of the soup kitchen? It closes quietly in late 1932, just months after Capone's conviction. Without its famous benefactor, donations dry up. Volunteers drift away. The line grows shorter, then vanishes altogether. The building becomes a print shop, later a thrift store. Eventually it's demolished. Nothing marks the spot where thousands once stood for soup, coffee, and hope handed out by a man both feared and adored. But memories remain. Stories passed from grandfather to grandson, whispered during cold winters, when the radiator clinks and the cupboards are bare. Capone fed us, they say. And no matter what history writes, no one can take that memory away. There's something haunting about the way Capone is remembered, not just for what he did, but for what he almost was, the boy from Brooklyn who wanted respect. The young man who learned too fast that fear comes cheaper than trust. The king of a city who smiled for the camera, even as bodies piled up in his name. He was a man of contrasts, of contradictions. He loved children and ordered executions. He gave out turkeys at Christmas and collected debts with baseball bats. He built his name on blood and bourbon, but died whispering about soup. Many people still think Capone's rise was inevitable, that someone, anyone, would have taken control of Chicago's underworld if he hadn't. But others say it was Capone's charm, his nerve, and his fatal need to be seen that made him different. So what do you think? Was Capone just a product of his time? Or a man who made the time bend around him? In the years that follow, Hollywood comes calling. Capone becomes a character, a larger-than-life figure with a cigar clenched in his teeth and a Tommy gun in hand. Gangster films explode in popularity. Books are written. TV shows dramatize his rise and fall. He becomes folklore, fiction, the kind of villain school kids whisper about on rainy days. And with every retelling, the lines blur. The soup kitchen fades. The laughter fades. All that remains is the image, the hat, the scar, the name. But here, in the quiet space of this story, we remember both. We remember the man, not the myth, not the monster, not the movie, but the man who once stirred a pot of stew on a frozen street, looked a stranger in the eye, and said, "Eat up, you'll feel better." And somehow, for a moment, he was right. Capone's trial may have ended with a gavel, but the echoes bounced through Chicago for years. In coffee shops and smoke-filled rooms, people whisper his name like he's still listening. And in a way, he is. Because long after the man is locked away, the world he helped shape keeps breathing. But back in the courtroom, the drama doesn't end with the verdict. Capone's legal team, stubborn to the last, files appeals. They challenge the process, the evidence, the very legality of using tax law as a criminal weapon. It's a kind of legal CPR, pumping the chest of a dying defense in hopes it might somehow spring back to life. It doesn't. The appeals are denied one by one. The law is airtight. The IRS didn't catch him in a shootout. They caught him with a pencil and a ledger. That simplicity is part of what makes it so devastating. Capone doesn't fight it much. Maybe the fire's gone. Maybe the steel in his spine has finally softened. Or maybe, deep down, he knows he had a long run. While he waits in county jail for transfer to federal prison, something strange happens. The reporters who once fought for quotes now gather for scraps of gossip. They print stories about what Capone eats for breakfast, who comes to visit, even which guard he nods to in the hallway. It's less journalism and more obituary in waiting, because Capone, for all his noise, has entered the long fade, and he knows it. His cell is small, bare cot, toilet, single bulb overhead that buzzes faintly like a tired fly. It's not the kind of place he's used to. No silk sheets, no steak dinners, just silence and routine. At first, he tries to command the space, acting like the boss even behind bars. "You know who I am?" he asks a guard once. The guard shrugs. "Yeah, you're the guy in cell 245. That hits harder than it should. Capone tries to keep up appearances. He reads newspapers, talks to his lawyers, jokes with other inmates, but the wear is starting to show. His weight fluctuates. He loses track of the date. There's an instance where he asks about a hitman he'd sent out 5 years earlier, one who'd been killed long ago. It's the beginning of the unraveling. Even in jail, he still tries to maintain an image. He brushes his hair back with the same part, wears his shoes polished, even if they're prison issued. And when visitors come, mostly May or Sunny, he sits up straighter, trying to seem whole, but they see it. His wife notices he forgets things, names, events, even where he is sometimes. His son grows quiet during visits. He hugs his father politely, carefully, like someone hugging a porcelain vase. There's one story tucked deep in a prison guard's memoir about Capone trying to organize a poker game behind bars. He arranges chairs, whispers to a few men, even draws up rules. But when the night comes, he forgets what it was for. He sits at the table for an hour, tapping the cards, humming an old tune. The other inmates don't laugh. They sit with him, play a quiet hand or two. Even behind bars, respect still lingers. Many people still think Capone lived a life without consequence until the very end, that the trial was his first real punishment. But others argue his punishment started earlier, that the paranoia, the endless threats, the betrayals, the price of being king, it all wore him down long before the bars did. So what do you think? Was this the end of Capone, or just another performance he couldn't finish? Outside, the city shifts. The outfit reorganizes. New names rise, more discreet than Capone ever was. They learn from his mistakes, stay out of the papers, pay your taxes, kill only when necessary. The streets he once ruled move on. The skyline grows taller, and the man who once owned it all, he's now just a shadow in a cell. One night, a priest visits. Capone asks for confession. The priest listens. When asked what he wants to confess, Capone says, "I fed people. That's something, right?" The priest doesn't answer, because how do you measure a soul like Capone's? With bullets? With bread? Or with the silence that follows? They say the first night in a federal prison always feels like a movie playing in reverse. All the glamour, the noise, the power, gone. What's left is cement, steel, and silence. Capone arrives at Atlanta U.S. Penitentiary on May 4th, 1932, stepping off the transport train not as a king, but as inmate, number 85. He's processed like everyone else, fingerprinted, searched, given a number, not a name. His mugshot is a strange thing. He's still trying to smile, as if he hasn't yet accepted that no amount of charisma is going to help him now. And inside, no soft leather chairs, no henchmen, no phone calls that make problems disappear, just a steel cot and rules. Capone's cell is plain. Iron bars, a toilet, and a narrow window too high to see through. He's assigned to laundry duty. He folds towels with the same hands that once signed million-dollar deals. His shifts are long, and his supervisors, unimpressed. To most inmates, he's just another prisoner. Some are in awe at first. "That's Al Capone," they whisper. But the mystique fades. He isn't the same Capone anymore. His mind is fogging, his body stiffens in the mornings, and sometimes he talks to himself when he thinks no one's listening. He tries to keep his pride, but it sags with each week. A man who once ran a city now flinches when a guard yells, "Lights out!" And there's something else happening. A slow, quiet breakdown, like a building cracking behind the walls. Neurosyphilis, the disease he ignored for over a decade, is no longer silent. Capone begins forgetting things. Small things at first. Names, dates, his daily schedule. Then come the bigger slips. He starts repeating stories. He thinks he's still in Chicago. He asks one inmate if he's seen Frank Nitti, who of course is miles away, running the outfit without him. Guards start reporting strange behavior. Capone polishing his shoes at 3 a.m. Capone hoarding bread under his mattress. Capone weeping quietly in the laundry room after misplacing his uniform. Doctors confirm the truth. His mind is deteriorating fast. The prison system doesn't know what to do with him. He's not violent. Not exactly. He's confused, gentle. Occasionally bursts into anger, yes. But more often he just stares at the wall, murmuring old jazz lyrics or asking about the soup kitchen. That comes up a lot. He asks the warden if they need help feeding the poor, tells his cellmate stories about the line on State Street and how they came for the stew. He remembers the smell of onions boiling, the scrape of tin bowls, the way people said thank you even when they had nothing else. In here, where time is meaningless, those memories matter. Maybe because they're real, or maybe because they're all he has left. Capone writes letters, but they rarely make sense. Some are addressed to people who've been dead for years. Others are just scrawls, drawings of soup pots, cash registers, the shape of Chicago's skyline. May visits when she can. She brings their son. Capone doesn't always recognize him. She holds his hand through the bars and doesn't cry until she's back on the train. Eventually, his condition is too severe for Atlanta. The government makes a decision. Capone is transferred again, this time to Alcatraz. The name alone makes men flinch. It's new, cold, isolated, perfect for someone like Capone. He arrives in 1934. The guards are instructed to treat him like any other inmate. No special privileges, no headlines. And that's exactly what happens. For the first time in years, Capone is invisible. At Alcatraz, his decline accelerates. He no longer understands the routines. He forgets which cell is his. He tells the guards he's late for a meeting with the mayor. He plays the banjo in the prison band. A detail that would be funny if it weren't so haunting. A man who once orchestrated massacres now plucks out slow, uneven versions of Home on the Range. He writes less, talks less, sleeps more. One inmate recalls him sitting in the yard, coat draped over his shoulders, asking if anyone's seen the soup today. There is no soup, just fog and cold wind and the sound of seagulls circling over the gray water. Many people still think Capone's time in Alcatraz was punishment enough, that no cell could be more confining than the one his own mind became. Others say he got off easy, that the real cost of his crimes can't be measured in years or symptoms. So what do you think? Did the disease take him, or did the silence finally wear him down? In 1939, doctors rule that Capone's condition is completely incapacitated. He's released early, paroled not because of pity, but because he's no longer a man, just a shadow with a heartbeat. They put him on a train, send him home, not to Chicago, but to Florida, to die in peace, if such a thing is possible. Palm Island, Miami Beach, 1940. The sun glints off the water in lazy flashes. Boats rock gently in the marina. The breeze carries a trace of salt and hibiscus through the wide windows of Capone's waterfront mansion. And inside, in a dim room with drawn curtains, the once most feared man in America sits slumped in a rocking chair, staring at the floor. Alphonse Capone is home, technically, physically, But the truth? He's already far, far gone. The house itself is quiet. No parties. No champagne towers or poker nights. Just the hum of a ceiling fan and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes on tile. May Capone, ever loyal, tends to him with the patience of a saint and the resignation of a woman who's been waiting for years to lose her husband. Inch by inch, she cooks meals he forgets to eat. She reminds him of his name every morning. She reads aloud from the paper, even though he no longer understands the headlines. Sometimes when he smiles at her, it's like the old owl is still in there. Other times, he calls her Mama. It breaks her heart, but she never says so. Capone's days take on a rhythm, though not one he controls. He wakes late, eats slowly, often with food dribbling down his chin. He shuffles from room to room, touching the walls like he's trying to remember where they once led. The garden becomes his favorite place. He'll sit for hours beside the fountain, watching the koi swim in lazy loops. Occasionally, he mutters about Nitty's mistake, or asks the gardener to call the Lexington, referring to his old Chicago headquarters, demolished years ago. One day, a nurse finds him trying to climb into a car that doesn't exist. "Gotta get to Cicero," he says. But Cicero is long gone, so is the outfit, and in most ways so is he. Visitors are rare. The old friends have moved on, those who survived. Frank Nitti is dead, a suicide after his own indictment. Tony Accardo, always the quiet one, has taken the reins of the outfit and moved into a new era. Clean suits, quiet dealings, no headlines. They don't speak of Capone much anymore. He's not a boss now. He's a memory. Sonny visits when he can. Now an adult, polite and solemn. He brings him candy sometimes, or old jazz records. Capone listens, nods along. But when Sonny leaves, he often asks, "Who was that nice boy?" Still, there are moments, strange lucid flashes. Once, while watching the evening news, Capone stands suddenly and shouts, "Tell Bugs I'll meet him at the garage." No one stops him. He walks in circles until the sun sets. Another day, a reporter tries to get a comment. Just a line, a quote, a farewell. He's turned away by the staff. But later that evening, Capone turns to May and says, "They still want to know my story, huh?" She nods gently. "They'll never get it," he says, smiling. And he's right. Because even now, with his mind flickering like a dying light bulb, there are things Al Capone takes to the grave. He often asks about the soup kitchen. Repeats the same questions. Did they eat today? Is it cold up there? Did the line stretch long? Sometimes he offers May imaginary money. "Make sure they get coffee," he says, pressing nothing into her hand. And once, in the middle of the night, he's found standing at the kitchen sink, ladling water into a bowl and handing it to no one. Many people still think these years were punishment, that this was justice, slow and cruel, that the man who once orchestrated murders now couldn't tie his own shoes. But others, they see something else, a strange kind of peace, a soft fade into oblivion, because Al Capone never faced a firing squad. He was never gunned down in a blaze of glory. He didn't die on the streets or in a back alley. He died surrounded by nurses, drifting in and out of a past no one else could see. So what do you think? Was it mercy? Or was it a sentence more fitting than any the courts could design? Because this wasn't Scarface's end. This was Al's, the quiet man, frail and childlike, offering invisible soup to invisible strangers. And in that final, gentle delusion, maybe he found the version of himself he liked best. January 25th, 1947. Palm Island wakes to warm breezes and early birdsong. The papers print stories of the snowstorms up north, of political squabbles in Washington, and of a flu going around in Tallahassee. It seems like a regular morning, but inside a large Mediterranean-style mansion at 93 Palm Avenue, the day begins differently. Al Capone is dying. He's been ill for days. Pneumonia, doctors say. complications from the stroke, his wife's whispers add. The truth is less clinical. His body is simply giving up. After years of deterioration, both mental and physical, there's nothing left to hold on to. He lies in bed, gaunt and pale, his frame swallowed by silk sheets he no longer recognizes. His breathing comes shallow. The man who once roared orders across Chicago now barely stirs under the weight of a blanket. May is by his side. She holds his hand, fingers trembling, her thumb brushing over the gold band on his ring finger. The nurse steps back, sensing this is a moment meant only for family. Capone's eyes flutter. His lips move. She leans in, and with a voice cracked and dry as paper, he mumbles just 3 words. Did they eat? No grand last words, no final confession. Just that same question he's asked for years, decades really. The same one that haunted him in Atlanta and echoed down the halls of Alcatraz. The same one he whispered into Florida wind and pressed into May's hands like a prayer. Did they eat? At 7:25 a.m., the last breath leaves him. There's no fanfare, no thunderous mourning. Just the soft beep of a stopped heart monitor, a choked sob from May, and the sound of a heron lifting off the dock outside, wings brushing the air like a curtain falling. Al Capone is gone. News spreads fast. Within hours, every major American newspaper carries the headline, A.L. Capone dead at 48. Most of them run stock photos. Capone laughing outside a courthouse, or gripping a cigar between his teeth like a prize fighter ready for a round. But they don't show what he looked like in the end. The sunken eyes, the quiet mouth, the frailty. They remember the myth, not the man. And maybe that's exactly how he would have wanted it. The funeral is modest, almost private. Held in Chicago, yes, but it's not the spectacle some expected. No brass bands, no limousines stretching down the block. Just family, a few close friends, and whispers, lots of whispers. He used to run this city. Did you hear he died asking about soup? Imagine Al Capone, just gone. He's buried at Mount Carmel Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois, alongside his father and brothers. The tombstone is simple. It bears his name, his birth and death dates, and one short inscription, "My Jesus Mercy." No mention of Chicago, no mention of crime, no mention of who he was, or who he thought he was. And yet, the legend refuses to die. Even as his body is lowered into the ground, stories bloom. Someone claims to have a letter he wrote the week before, filled with regrets. Another says he hid a fortune, millions, in a secret vault beneath the Lexington Hotel. TV specials are made, books are written. His name becomes immortal, stitched into the American psyche alongside Billy the Kid and Jesse James. Not because he was the most violent, or even the most successful, but because he mattered to the press, to the people, to the story we keep telling about ambition, corruption, and the blurry line between villain and folk hero. Many people still think of Capone as just a gangster, but others remember something else. A smile behind a ladle, a gloved hand placing bread on a plate, a line of shivering men given dignity in a bowl of broth. So what do you think? Was that act just a cover? Or was it the one true piece of himself he never quite lost? Chicago never builds a monument for him. No statue, no plaque. But sometimes in winter, when the air gets sharp and the wind stings the skin, someone will pass a long line outside a shelter or soup kitchen and whisper, Capone would have fed them. And maybe that's enough. Even in death, Capone's presence lingers, like smoke in a coat long hung up, or footsteps echoing in a hallway long swept clean. He may be buried, but Chicago still feels his shadow. It's not loud anymore. It's quieter than that. It's in the way people talk, in the careful silences, in the way certain blocks carry a story no one writes down. Because here's the truth. He built something that didn't die with him. The outfit continues, not with cigars and headlines, but with discretion. Under Tony Accardo and later Sam Giancana, it evolves into something leaner, smarter, less flashy. They stop hosting parties, they stop courting the press, and they make sure that what happened to Capone never happens again. Capone's name is no longer spoken in strategy meetings or whispered over scotch. It's etched in a cautionary tale. The boss who flew too close to the flashbulbs, the man who made the whole world look, and once they looked, they never looked away. But not all his legacy is whispered in backrooms, in Southside barbershops, on old stoops in Cicero. People still tell stories. Not about the murders, usually. Not the blood. Those parts are too ugly for bedtime. Instead, they talk about the coats he handed out in the winter, the rent he paid for a widow whose husband disappeared, the bag of sugar left on a doorstep during rationing, the Christmas parties at the orphanage. They say he gave more to the people than the city ever did, and maybe that's just memory playing dress-up, but maybe not. Years later, in the 1960s, an old man opens a restaurant in Bridgeport. Above the register is a faded black and white photo. Capone, young and sharp, standing next to a kid barely knee-high. The caption says nothing, but the man who runs the place nods toward it every time someone asks about rent or comes up short on a bill. Guy in that photo made sure my granddad ate. That means something. The picture's still there, dusty, quiet, but not forgotten. Meanwhile, historians begin their work. Books pour out. Titles like Public Enemy, The Outfit, Capone, The Man, and the Myth. Academics argue, was he a tyrant or a tragic figure? A cold-hearted sociopath or a boy who grew too fast in a world too hard? Many people still think Capone was simply a monster, and there's plenty of evidence for that. Others think he was just a man who believed in power more than peace. But some, just some, say he was both. The soup and the shotgun. The open hand and the clenched fist. So what do you think? Can a man be two things at once? Can he feed you and fear you? In pop culture, Capone becomes a favorite villain, played by actors in fedoras, chewing cigars, laughing as the world burns behind them. His voice is mimicked, his laugh exaggerated, his life rewritten for theaters and TV specials. He becomes less person, more icon. By the 1980s, he's as recognizable as Elvis or Einstein. And that's the strangest twist of all, because for a man who spent his life trying to be loved, then feared, then remembered, he got all three. In Chicago today, you won't find a museum dedicated to Capone, but if you ask a cab driver to take you to one of his old haunts, he'll know. He'll point to where the Lexington Hotel once stood, to a side alley near Clark Street, to a corner bar where he used to sit, they say, and maybe, just maybe, he'll tell you a story his grandfather told him about soup and kindness and how, once, for a little while, the scariest man in America gave the city something warm to hold on to. He died forgotten by the men who feared him, but remembered by the men who were fed by him. Maybe that's how it always goes. The years roll on, and Al Capone becomes less of a person and more of a symbol, a stand-in for everything America simultaneously despises and envies. Wealth without permission, power without title, fame without merit. He's taught in classrooms not as a man, but as a lesson, a warning, a wink. Textbooks print grainy photos of his fedora and cigar. Tour guides in Chicago gesture at now empty lots with theatrical flair. This is where Capone's men opened fire, they say. Right over there was the garage. St. Valentine's Day, 1929. But the real Capone? The one who laughed too loud, hugged too hard, and wept when his mother was ill? That version rarely makes it in. His family fades from the spotlight. intentionally. May Capone lives quietly until her death in 1986, never remarrying, never selling her story. She refuses interviews, declines book deals. Some say she kept a box of Al's letters. Others say she burned them. Either way, she never told. Sonny Capone lives a life of obscurity, works in retail, marries, raises a family. He changes his name, tries to disappear from the shadows his father cast. Occasionally, a reporter tracks him down. He always says the same thing: "I remember him as my dad," and nothing more. One curious thread remains, however: Capone's final years, the part nobody really talks about. The letters, hundreds of pages, scribbled on hotel stationery, napkins, the backs of envelopes, found years later in trunks, in Florida basements, in dusty attics from here to Cicero. Some are nonsense, pages of looping scrawls, childish drawings of soup bowls and fish. Others are lucid, frighteningly so. One letter, written in 1943, reads, "They said I was the devil, but the devil don't serve soup." Another ends with, "I hope they remember the kitchen. That was mine. I paid for the potatoes." It's strange, reading those words, to think that that was what haunted him. Not the blood, not the trials, not the betrayals. The potatoes. Many people still think those letters are fakes, fabricated by collectors, embellished by distant relatives. Others say they're the clearest glimpse into his final mind. So what do you think? Are they real, or just another myth in a life built on them? Meanwhile, the world moves forward. Cities change. Violence adapts. Power looks different now. Cleaner suits, subtler handshakes. No need for Tommy guns in the daylight. But Capone's fingerprints still linger in strange places. In how police departments talk about organized crime. In how politicians frame the public enemy. In how Hollywood shoots scenes with shadowy crime bosses, all modeled, consciously or not, after him. He's become the blueprint, the cautionary tale, the cinematic villain that keeps audiences hooked. And somewhere in all that glamour, the truth keeps slipping further away. But if you listen closely, especially on a cold winter morning, walking past a soup kitchen where steam billows from a side window, you might hear a voice from the past, faint, gravelly, still echoing. "Make sure they all eat, huh?" And you might wonder, was there some part of him that wasn't an act? Some flicker of warmth inside all that iron and ice? Back in Chicago, the corner of South State Street no longer resembles what it was. No line of men. No clatter of tin trays. No smell of broth in the air. But now and then, someone stops there, stands for a minute, and remembers that once a man who ruled by fear still asked every day if the people were fed, not because he had to, but because something inside him needed it to be true. Long after Capone is gone, long after his name fades from the headlines and the last of his lieutenants follow him into the grave, something curious begins to happen. The legend comes back, not as fear, not even as fascination, but as nostalgia. Not for the violence, of course. Not really. No one misses the shootings or the bombings, the fear of walking into the wrong neighborhood at the wrong hour. But there's something else, something softer, that people seem to hold on to. The certainty Capone brought a strange order to chaos. During the worst days of Prohibition, when politicians turned a blind eye and the banks were folding, he ran things. He made sure businesses opened. He settled disputes. He even fed people when the city wouldn't. People remember that. In the decades that follow, writers revisit Capone like clockwork. Every 10 years or so, a new biography appears. Each promises to reveal the real Al Capone. Some dig into his crimes. Others focus on his mental decline. A few cling to the romance, the suits, the parties, the smile. But no book captures it all, because Capone didn't live a life of neat chapters. He lived like a jazz riff. Loud, unpredictable, sometimes offbeat, yet somehow always his. Tourists still come to Chicago asking about him. Is there anything left of Capone? Most locals shrug. Nah, not really. But if you're lucky, and your cab driver is old enough, or his father was, you might get something more. You know that parking lot on Clark Street? That used to be the garage. Or, my granddad swore Capone paid for his uncle's surgery. Never told anyone. Just showed up one day with a doctor and an envelope. Truth, legend, memory, at a certain point, they all blur together. Down in Florida, the house on Palm Island still stands. At least for now. Developers have tried to tear it down more than once. The land is valuable. The view, even more so. But each time, someone stalls the process. A historian, a preservationist, a tourist group that insists it should be a museum. And every few years, someone sneaks onto the property just to say they stood where Capone once sat, that they saw the fountain, that they touched the same doorknob, not because they admire him, but because they can't forget him. In 1990, a man named Ralph, now in his 80s, sits for a taped interview. He's asked what it was like growing up during Capone's reign. He smiles and says, "Well, it wasn't safe, but it sure was predictable." The interviewer presses him. "Did you ever meet him?" He nods, slowly. Once. Just once. I was maybe 12. I was hungry. My old man had lost his job. Capone gave me soup. Just handed it to me. The room goes quiet. Then Ralph leans forward and adds, "You can say what you want about what he did. I'm not here to argue. But that day, that soup kept me alive. So, yeah, I remember. And maybe that's what lingers most. The scale of Capone's life. Most people die with their name on a certificate, a headstone, and maybe a few fading photos in someone's attic. Capone? He died with a legend still evolving. A myth still argued over in barbershops and classrooms. A shadow that flickers across history books and YouTube thumbnails alike. Many people still think we talk too much about men like him, that we should let them fade, let them rest, let them stop taking up space in our imaginations. But others say it's not the man we remember. It's the warning, the contradiction, the story. So what do you think? Should we stop telling it? Or is it the story we can't stop telling? Because buried inside it somewhere is a question he never stopped asking. Did they eat? And that might be the part of Al Capone that never dies. Capone's story, by this point, doesn't just belong to history. It belongs to culture. It belongs to the bookshelf, the screen, the song lyric, the whispered anecdote. He's been turned into 1,000 silhouettes. A gangster, a ghost, a punchline, a paradox. But in the quiet corners of real life, far from the movie sets and documentary voiceovers, his echo still slides through. There's an old restaurant in Little Italy with a photo of Capone framed in the back room. Not in the main dining area, too flashy, but in the staff hallway near the freezer. It's been there since the 1950s. No one remembers who put it up, but no one takes it down. Some say it's for luck. Some say it's for respect. The staff just calls him the boss. And what about the city? Chicago, in all its grit and grandeur, doesn't need Capone anymore. It's a place of finance now. Architecture, music, deep dish, the Bears. But somewhere beneath the new steel and glass, the bones of the old city remain. The alleys where trucks used to idle with bootleg booze. The basements that once echoed with dice and piano keys. The police reports that never got filed. The business cards with no addresses. The Chicago Capone knew is gone, but the one he shaped, still standing. Academics continue to debate his impact. Some see Capone as a social failure, a man who exploited poverty and lawlessness to build a kingdom of fear. Others argue he was inevitable, that prohibition created him, that the public's thirst for liquor and spectacle made him necessary. There are even a few who suggest he was a kind of dark Robin Hood, redistributing wealth establishing an order in chaos, helping the people the system ignored. It's a debate with no clean ending, and maybe that's the point. Capone was never clean. He was complicated. There's a small plaque in a Chicago police station, nearly hidden in a back hallway, dedicated to the officers who tried to bring down organized crime in the 1920s and 30s. Capone's name isn't on it, of course, but it lingers. He's the reason they're remembered. He's the reason the department changed. He's the reason the word mobster carries weight even now. And then there's the human part, the quiet part, the part most don't see, the part where Capone, in the final days, kept a single framed photo by his bedside, not of his empire, not of his gang, not of Chicago, but of his son, Sonny, smiling and small, maybe 6 years old, holding a toy train. The edges are curled, the ink has faded, but to Capone, it meant something. It was a reminder, maybe, of a world he once believed he could step back into, a world before the raids, before Alcatraz, before the soup kitchen became a story instead of a place. In 2025, a museum in Chicago runs a temporary exhibit, The City and the Gangster. Artifacts on display include old Tommy guns, prohibition bottles, press clippings, and behind a glass case, a ladle, a worn metal ladle. No engraving, no handle grip, no provenance. Just a note that reads, "Said to be from Capone's South State Street soup kitchen. Origin uncertain." Visitors stare at it. Some laugh, some shake their heads. One man, older, leans in and says, "If that's real, I ate from that thing." Nobody corrects him. So what do you think? Did the man become the myth? Or did the myth bury the man? Was Capone just another criminal? Or was he something else? Whatever you believe, one thing remains certain. His story still feeds us, not with soup, but with the uneasy comfort of complexity. And for a man who lived between lines, between fame and fear, cruelty and kindness, sin and service, maybe that's all he ever wanted, to be remembered as something more than a monster. The final chapter in Capone's story isn't written with bullets or court verdicts. It's written with distance. Time has a way of softening sharp edges, of turning crimes into anecdotes, tragedies into symbols, and people into silhouettes. With Capone, the process started early, before his death even. But now, decades later, the man has all but vanished beneath the weight of his own legend. Ask 10 people who Capone was, and you'll get 10 answers. A gangster, a businessman, a murderer, a philanthropist, an American success story, a cautionary tale. And all of them, in a way, are right. In his lifetime, Capone craved two things: control and recognition. He got both, but not in the way he wanted. Because while he controlled Chicago's streets, he lost his mind. While he filled headlines, he emptied his health. While people still speak his name, they often forget who he really was. And perhaps, in some twist of irony, that's what immortality looks like: to be remembered vaguely, to be misquoted forever, to become a symbol so heavy that no truth can carry it. Today, there's no bronze statue of Al Capone in the city he once ruled. You won't find a park named for him. No street signs, no official tours. But in the old neighborhoods, Cicero, Little Italy, Bridgeport, if you lean in close, if you ask the right grandparent or bar owner or retired cop, you'll hear the stories. The ones not in books, the ones passed down like family recipes, equal parts fact and feeling. Like the time Capone paid off a family's mortgage with cash, or how he handed out Christmas turkeys to children during a brutal winter, or how, when no one else did, he fed the city's hungry, one bowl of soup at a time. And maybe that's the strange truth about Al Capone. Not that he was good, not that he was bad, but that he was both, and never quite at peace with either side. He was the man who ordered killings over territory, then prayed quietly at his mother's funeral. The man who made millions off bootlegging, then wept when his son said he wanted nothing to do with the business. The man who laughed in front of cameras, then fell silent when asked what he feared most. His answer? Being forgotten. Many people still think Capone's greatest crime was murder. Others say it was arrogance. But perhaps it was misunderstanding himself, believing he could be both savior and tyrant, that the soup could cancel the scars, that the smile could outshine the shadow. So what do you think? Was he remembered the way he wanted, or the way he deserved? The waves still roll quietly onto Palm Island. The koi still circle the old fountain, long drained. And somewhere in the wind that rushes between broken bricks and boarded-up storefronts in Chicago, his voice lingers. Make sure they all eat. And maybe that's the ending. Not fireworks, not gunshots, not a chase through city streets. Just that line, soft, worn, echoed one last time. Did they eat? Yes, Al. For a while, they did. So now, as the final echoes of this story fade into the quiet night, let's leave the legend where it belongs, in a past filled with contradiction and complexity. Let the lights dim gently. Let the streets of 1930s Chicago fall still, the snow settling on silent rooftops, the soup lines long gone, the click of polished shoes replaced by the hush of memory. Let Capone rest, not as the monster or the martyr, but as a man who once believed that generosity could redeem violence, that bread could balance blood. Close your eyes and imagine the last bowl being ladled, the last coat handed out, the last name checked off a list no one kept. No headlines now, no fear, no spectacle, just the stillness of a warm room on a cold morning. Let the story settle into your breath. Let it slow your thoughts. Let the contradictions of history wash over you like rain tapping on a distant window. And if your mind drifts towards sleep, let it drift gently, because the story's been told. And the night is quiet again.